Welcome to the Savage Worlds GM podcast. I'm your host, Jared Savage Daddy Gunning. Tonight's episode brought to you by Roll20.net, the world's largest virtual tabletop. Go check them out today on Roll20.net. Follow us on social media. We're on Twitter and Facebook at SWGM Podcast. We're on iTunes. You can subscribe on iTunes at Savage Worlds Game Master Podcast. And also check out the YouTube channel at SWGM Podcast. Fifth time in a row, nailed it. Tonight's topic, theatrical release. And we're going to be talking about bringing more theatrics into your game, discussion about theater of the mind versus maps and minis, all things role play, all things theater involved in the hobby. Here to discuss it, Dave, the rules Maven Scott.
It was better than Cats. It was the best thing ever.
He loved it. He'll see it over and over and over again. And some call him Jib.
I have seen Into the Darkness, and no one was spared, not even the children.
Run, rabbit, run! Okay, so let's start. I think we, and also too, if you're watching the live stream on YouTube, feel free to participate in the conversation. If you have any questions that you want to ask, feel free to throw them in there. We do address them during the show.
Their chat has already awarded you a Benny for nailing the intro.
It's 5 times in a row. I'm on a streak. I'm gonna crash. I'm gonna crash and burn hard probably next time.
Yeah, you're not even gonna remember what the words are next time.
That's right. I won't even. You know what? I'll nail the intro, then fuck up everybody's name.
You'll say we're sponsored by Roll20's competitor or something of that nature. Completely sideways.
So let's talk about. I think probably the easiest thing to kind of discuss up front, and that's. And also the most relevant. I want to make sure we cover it in depth. We've had an entire show dedicated to it. So if you guys want to go back to the archive in iTunes or on the YouTube channel, go take a look at the Savage Worlds GM podcast or Hangout playlist. There you can probably find it. We did a whole episode dedicated to theater of the mind versus minis and maps. I think I just kind of want to touch on a lot of those topics again because it did come up in a poll here recently as a question from one of the viewers. So let's go ahead and just sort of tackle that.
It was actually discussed quite a bit on the unofficial Discord today in their general channel. There was people talking about, minis and grids and whether or not that was Savage Worlds germane or if it was from other systems and things like that. So I definitely think it's something that unfortunately is kind of so much ingrained in the hobby that people stop and don't think about the fact there's an entire other side of the hobby that never uses minis or maps.
I'm personally one of the GMs that runs full theater of the mind for Roll20.net. Even though Roll20 has a map application, you can lay down a map, you can overlay a grid on it, you can bring in token images. I mean, you can run an actual tabletop mini session on Roll20. I choose not to.
I would go so far as to say you can do more with that than you can with playing on the tabletop because you can customize what each character sees so the player doesn't have any information that their character wouldn't have. So if you want to capture that, I hate to use the word immersive feeling of this is what my character sees, you can simulate that better in an electronic environment than you can at the tabletop unless you're going to have every player leave the room and bring them in one at a time and pull back the sheet only over the section of the map that they can see. So,
right, the whole fog of war and dynamic lighting mechanics in Roll20 do make that possible. There's a lot of legwork on the part of the GM. There's a lot of prep work to even make that even anywhere near captivating or even coming close to working.
Roll20 is not the only way to achieve that. There's a lot of different tabletops out there. There's a lot of different electronic environments that simulate it. There's even a few things like Dwarven Forge still sells like the 3D modeled terrain you can actually lay out to try to get the same effect tabletop. But I think there is something to be said for if you want to go that level, there are tools that let you do it.
Right, and we're not making a judgment call here either. If you enjoy maps and minis, by all means, rock out with your cock out. Who cares? The reason tend to be more theater minded is because I'm a lazy fuck when it comes to game prep. I do not want to sit here and spend a week trying to find the right map, scaling it down the image to the right size. The game moves too fast at the speed of thought and imagination for me to even try to keep up with that. And whenever I try to do a map, it devolves into you have the same problem. You have the same problem that you have at the tabletop in a virtual reality system. The second you put grids and a map on, you start seeing the measuring tools come out and people trying to physically measure the distance between things, and then they start making decisions about playing a board game rather than role playing, in my opinion.
Years ago, I got a board game called Hero Quest. And it comes with a board you lay out, complete with doors to lay down for where there's doors on the board, and physical little chests you set in the corners, and bookcases and tables, and I mean, it takes it to a whole new level. And I got this before I had gotten into D&D and whatnot. It was about the same time, but it was a few months prior. And that sold me as to why I never wanted to go down the maps and minis, because someone always knocks something over, or they assume that because it's not on the map, it's not in the room. So therefore, if you didn't have a token for a wrench to lay in one corner, they don't know there's a wrench in the corner and things like that. There's too many things that I found with that board game that led me away from maps and minis entirely.
Well, and I also think it's
chat like cats.
Yeah, cats, small children, pets become Godzilla whenever you set up a map. Well, here's the other thing too. You can achieve the same effect, if not better, by going. You don't lose a lot going to theater of the mind. Now, there is a transition that you have to make as a player to GM. When it's like, well, wait, what does it look like? And you go, it's a standard convenience store. Well, you may have somebody who lives in the Midwest and somebody who lives in the Southwest and someone who lives on the East Coast playing. And guess what? No such thing as a standard layout for a convenience store among those three people. But you can very easily go, oh, there's a counter at the front right corner when you come through the front door. There's this, milk's in the back, blah, blah, blah. And we'll figure things out as we go along. The thing to remind the characters is, hey, anything that would normally be here is here. So don't ask me if you can pick up, if I say, hey, the bay doors, the aluminum bay doors slide up on a parking garage in a zombie apocalypse, and actually not a parking garage, but an auto shop in a zombie apocalypse. And don't ask me if there's an impact hammer or a wrench there. Yeah, you can just declare there's an impact hammer, or I pick up the hammer that's laying on the table, and I go, fine. That's exactly what you do. You pick up the hammer.
You have alluded to the key of theater of the mind. Theater of the mind is an assumption that if it makes sense to the narrative, it's there. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be explicitly stated or shown. If it suits the narrative that's going on, it's there. It's there. If it makes it interesting, it's there. Oh, we have to figure out how we're going to get across this chasm. Damn, I wish we had some rope. Well, as it happens, there's rope.
Yeah.
Why? Because
the would you like there to be clouds turned on its head to when a player asks me if something is in the room, I'm automatically going to say yes. That thing is laying in this corner or whatnot to a certain extent. Now, the flip side is, no, you're not going to find the MacGuffin in the corner of the room. You're not going to find the easy button to whatever the scenario is.
It's not going to be an easy button.
You know,
but there's going to be whatever makes the evolving story interesting. Now, okay, here I don't typically use maps and minis because, in part because I'm lazy and I don't really want to spend my game prep time making maps, although I like maps. Maps are fun. But the real thing that I I don't like is having spent a bunch of time making a map and getting together minis and whatnot, and then they turn left instead of right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Suddenly the map doesn't give you what you need because the players have gone away from the area you have the map ready for.
Right. So I would rather just draw it in with words and let's go on our way. A blank map there in case, okay, we get into the bar and things are getting, starting to get exciting. Wait. Where is everybody? I need to know exactly where everybody is right now. Somebody from one of the players. Cool. Let's draw that out real quick. Let's sketch that map out. Figure out where everybody is. Yeah. So, but, and this is much, and the maps that I like to make are more like handout maps and, reference maps that are in my notes, but not battle maps.
So
for a number of reasons. One is they're going to turn left instead of right anyway. But the other thing is, as Jared pointed out, the instant the minis hit the table, so do the yardsticks. And it's no longer a role-playing game. It's a tactical miniatures game.
So just so that we don't completely, overlook the other style of play, I mean, we even have in chat Zavia from her RPG Maps Patreon, where her entire thing is she puts out detailed maps, both with and without a grid, so that you can use them for your game table. I know Frank Turfler is another guy who posts stuff to the Google Plus community quite a bit, and he even, I believe it was there for a while, every Monday was giving away a free map. It was either Monday or Friday, I don't remember which, but I was actually a patron, so I was getting all of those maps anyway. My point is that if you're a map person, there's a lot of resources out there for maps and minis. There's physical terrain. There's the ability to go down to your local hobby store and buy, styrofoam and a cutter and make stuff. There are tutorials online to how to do 2D terrain, 3D terrain, and 2.5D terrain, how to take Zavia's map and make it pop for 3D. That said, something that someone said in chat sticks to me. Jason Kennedy says, maps do a really good job of having everyone see the same thing for good and bad. To me, that's bad, but I can see the good. It makes my job as a GM easier that I don't have to repeat the room is 15 feet wide to 3 separate players because 2 of them were on their phone the other time I said it. They can just look at the damn map and see that the room is 15 feet wide.
Right.
That said, to me, the flip side, the bad of that is I don't want to have the weight of having to come up with a map that captures what your imagination can create when I say you enter a deep, dark cave. It's dripping with moisture. Moss climbs the walls, and the darkness recedes slowly as you venture forward with your torch. To every person who just heard that description, there's a different image in your head, and I don't want to throw a map down and take that away. To me, that's one of the most glorious parts of what we do, is the power of the imagination to build that thing in your head. I don't want to rob that from the player.
Well, I'm gonna pile on in here. I cheat to a degree with Theater of the Mind and Roll20. What I will do is I will find artwork, pieces that are representative of the tone or the feeling that I want to evoke in the player, and I will drop it on the table and say, this is not a map. This is not what you see here in the photo is not exactly what is there. It is a representation of what is there. So if I'm running a zombie game and they're in a hospital, I will go find on Google Images abandoned psychiatric wards where it looks very fucking creepy and spooky and tiles are falling off.
Sure.
Yeah. And throw it up there on the screen for everybody to see because it evokes a mood.
Right.
Because some people are visual.
Right.
Some people are just visual.
Now, with everything I said about Theater of the Mind and, the issues I have with maps, there are times when it is just flat cool to be able to say, when they go, so Where are we? Whap! Right here.
Yeah, here's the battle map. Here's the dragon that dominates the center of the table that gives you that physical sense of how much bigger it is than your mini. There's something that can actually be added to the game through that.
I actually heard a player once, though, in a game, wasn't a game I was running, I just happened to be walking by and I heard this, and it was because I knew the people playing, that things are going on and the GM reaches over, picks up a big map and sets it on a table, and one of the players goes, oh, this is important. There's a map. Like,
yep. Well, I'm going to say this too about, and like I said, we don't, this isn't about giving equal time to which is better. We're talking about theater of the mind. So here's the other thing I want to say that theater of the mind, what a lot of GMs who are starting to run theater of the mind want to really focus on. Human beings have 5 senses. Sight is only one of them.
And it's one of the weaker ones.
Right.
What you hear, what you smell in the air, the ESP, the hairs that stand up on the back of your neck, because something you're not even sure how you sensed is going on.
So evocative descriptions in theater of the mind are crucial, and you need to play on all the senses or the right senses at the right moment when you're making those descriptions. So for Dave's description of the cavern, I might add there's a dank smell of something rotting that you're catching a whiff of on the cool, heavy, moist air that you're breathing into your lungs, that you're laboring to breathe because it's so heavy with moisture. Your skin almost crawls. I mean, you can play on all of those senses, and you should. Now, one of the things I do love about running Theater of the Mind is it gives me an opportunity to sarcastically sit back and say, plot appropriate distance. When people start asking me
earlier.
When people start asking, wait, how far away are we from the door? Your plot appropriate distance. What are you trying to achieve?
When Jim was mentioning the rope is in the room, and I was going to say the plot appropriate props are in the room, exactly. Just as it's at a plot appropriate distance wherever you want to try to go. With that said, I think that's one of the challenges a lot of GMs face is, okay, so the book says that this gun has a reach of 12, 24, 48. Mm-hmm. What is that in theater of the mind?
It's either short distance, it's either short range, medium range, or long range.
Yeah, and it's plot appropriate distance. Yeah. In almost all occasions, you want to go, can they get there in a round or two? Can they get there? Does it take them more than that, or does it take them a long time to get there? If it's a long time to get there, it's probably long range. If they can get there next round, it's probably short range. You have to think in terms like that. Your plot appropriate distance becomes the way you have to wrap your head around so much of what's going on, including things like someone drops a grenade in the room. Well, were you in the blast radius of the grenade or were you not? Well, okay, let me get out the template and drop it on your... Oh, wait, there's no map.
Real quick.
Deal with that in a theater of the mind situation is somebody just threw a grenade in the room. Give me an agility roll to see if you're in the blast zone.
Yeah, definitely do it that way.
The dive for cover rule and just use it in reverse to determine if they are in the radius.
Well, no, I'm going to throw this out here too because Savage Worlds has a 1 inch equals 6 feet. General rule. So 1 inch on a tabletop, if you're working with minis and miniatures and a map, 1 inch is 6 feet.
Or 2 yards, yeah.
Or 2 yards, same difference. 6 feet, 2 yards, roundabout. So, with the burst templates, you know what the diameter, what the radius is. You can tell if somebody's in a small, medium, or large burst template just by taking a look at the template, and you can kind of in your head figure that out. But what Dave is saying is also correct and also true. Okay, well, if it's going to take them, if they can get there next round, it's short range. Well, of course, it's short range because most character movement is 6 inches. Even if they run, maybe at the very best, level best, they're going to do 12 inches. And 12 inches on a range table is still short range. So,
and for those of you wondering how you determine if a run is successful or not, in Theater of the Mind. 4 is success. They rolled a 4 on their run die, they got there this round. If they didn't roll a 4 on their run die, they didn't.
You can do that as well, right? Instead of measuring movement. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think that, I mean, with Theater of the Mind, like we said, you have to adapt. You have to be fairly good on your feet and able to just kind of accept. There is a point of yes and that is really important, really, to Theater of the Mind.
Yeah.
Or yes and no but, not that but this as well. Yes and yeah.
Yes. The other thing I would say is, when in doubt, err on the side of the players.
Fuck the players. No, never err on the side of the players. Fuck the players. No, I'm just kidding. Fuck them. They knew the job was dangerous when they took it. No.
I'm not going to fully disagree, because I vastly subscribe to the don't be an ass to your players and they'll actually play along. But at the same time, I think there's something to be said of, err on the side of your players up to a certain point. Don't cheapen the experience by giving away too much.
Well, I would say, let's
I never said they always get to win. What I said was, when in doubt,
mm-hmm.
if it's like, am I close enough to attack that guy? Sure.
Yeah, true. True enough. There is I might twist that slightly and go err on the side of cool or dramatic. Can I attack that guy? Well, he's the big bad who is currently setting up to do something really dramatic next round. No, let's see who draws the better initiative card. You can't quite get there, but if you give me a run roll, you might.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think what we're saying is err on the side of the narrative, the story itself, what's going on dramatically in the situation. If it comes up to a tie, give it to the player,
mm-hmm.
but don't pander to the player and just let them win or say yes to everything that they ask.
So, of course, we did get a comment in the chat, Jared.
Throw it up.
That you're going to want to avoid.
I'm going to want to avoid.
Asking about something that happened recently.
Sure, I'll take it on.
Ruben asks, what about the theatrical TPK?
Absolutely, GM Fiat. If it fits the story narrative, it happens. And okay, so for the who's at home,
this deserves a little bit of backstory.
For the who's at home, so we're running a mobster. I'm running a mobster game. Dave's playing in it, and I mean mobster, not monster. We're talking about American Mafia in the 1970s. Ruben and his crew were pretty much returning Vietnam vets, hired by a mafia family to do a job. Easy job. All you got to do, we'll give you all the cars, all the guns, anything you need. We're talking about a haul of $1.5 million. There's 3 different bank robberies going on today, and the getaway cars are all meeting at one location to load up a seafood truck. They're going to drive it by a road. All you got to do is run it down and bring home the loot. Okay, simple enough. The end of that session ended with, and I swear to God, almost the entire party fatally wounded, like crippled.
Two of us had been steamrolled by the semi when it rolled over, literally rolled on its side over the vehicle we were in. All 4 vehicles involved, the 2 vehicles given to the players and both of the vehicles given to the NPCs were destroyed. One of which was a giant fireball on the side of the road.
And the player characters just left it there and called a cab.
All the money was gone, destroyed in the fire. So
they show back up at the rendezvous point with 30 grand instead of $1.5 million. When the Italian mobster who hired them goes to take the duffel bag of money they do have, Ruben's character decides to mouth off in role play, which should have gotten him a bullet to the fucking head immediately. That was skipped, and then
with a made man in the mob was amazing.
Okay, so you ask yourself as a GM, all right, it's a mobster movie. What would happen in a mobster movie if the entire crew completely screwed up this? Oh yeah, it would be a St. Valentine's Day massacre. And guess what? That's exactly what happened narratively. GM Fiat, no rolling for initiative, no draw your guns, Johnny. No, just boom, dead. You're all dead. You're all sleeping with the fishes. End of story. Roll up new characters.
I think the interesting aspect of it was once the behind the scenes stuff the players weren't aware of was kind of laid bare. Everyone agreed to the theatrical TPK. Like no one was still going. But wait, my character might have... No, we all kind of accepted the fact we had turned tits up so bad, there was no coming back.
Well, and we made the comment for anybody who's seen Goodfellas. It's the scene where Joe Pesci's character goes to get made, and it's a trap to hit him and whack him. And then De Niro and the other guy, are on the phone. What happened? He's gone. What do you mean he's gone? What do you mean, what do I mean? He's gone. He's gone, and there was nothing nobody could do about it. And they hung up the phone. That's the end of that. That's the end of that session. That it just plays out. Look, they're dead. They're gone. There's nothing nobody can do.
And Tim adds in chat that of course the interesting aspect of this is that literally our characters stepped off a plane from Vietnam and died before 24 hours passed.
Yeah.
Survived the war all the way through to the end of the war. Come home and one day killed us. But no, I think in theatrically, when you start talking about bringing theatrics to the table, bringing that stuff to the game, you've got to be prepared for the edge case stuff, like the total TPK or the total party win. You know, you just narratively, no, the players did something so fucking epic. The story so far is now over. And you just narrate how that played out and then let them choose what they do afterward. There's a certain aspect of these are the edge cases. These are those random, rare thing that could happen. And you as a GM have got to be ready to roll with that in one direction or the other if you're going to bring that level of theatrics to the game.
So I think we've sufficiently handled Theater of the Mind, unless anybody in the live chat has any other comments or questions about Theater of the Mind roleplay versus minis and maps. The key thing to remember is 1 inch equals 6 feet in real world, kind of spacing and timing. That is a really good rule of thumb for you as a GM to be able to make decisions about distance. And also too, if you're in a warehouse, remember, unless somebody flips on a fucking light or it's the middle of the day, that shit's dark. I think one of the things that the GM also needs to realize about Theater of the Mind, as well as minis and maps, this gets overlooked all the time too in mini and map play. What is the atmosphere? What are the atmospheric effects in play? Is there rough terrain? Are we talking about, rain-slicked roads? Are we talking about a warehouse that's jam-packed with crates? Great, they have cover everywhere. We need to kind of remember those things when we're making decisions or even discussing it. If there's available cover in the room that would not otherwise be obvious to the player characters, describe it. Yeah. And call it out as a GM. Break narrative for a second and go, guys, there's plenty of cover. Everywhere you look, you could just move right into cover. There's no roll necessary.
I think another thing that I do just want to throw out there, there's a document on the PEG website that talks about converting vehicle speeds to inches for acceleration and top speed for actually taking vehicles that aren't in the core rules and adapting them to the tabletop. That same conversion metric where it talks about, feet and miles to inches can be used if you want to reverse that. If you want to take a look at, the 12, 24, 48 for the gun and find out what's the real world equivalent of that. You can give that to your players in that same conversion if you want to step away from the simple 1 inch equals 6 feet conversion. There is that conversion available as well. if you want to take it to that next level, I think that's going a bit far. But that's a tool that's out there that PEG's released. So be aware, there's a lot of different tools you can use to capture this without needing the map if you don't want to.
Right. Oh, and I'm going to add one more thing about Theater of the Mind and maps as far as that goes. Theater of the Mind is more about narrative and drama, less about verisimilitude. Maps are more about verisimilitude. Here is exactly what is there in the room, in exact locations and precise distances. So if you're using a map, you're wanting to be more realistic with what you're doing. But if you're going to be using Theater of the Mind, remember to have some flexibility and verisimilitude when it comes to, you know, oh God, yeah, well, I pick up a fire extinguisher. Well, you have to first punch the glass to break the fire. No, just let them just elbow it, take it out, and in one movement, don't cause additional actions. You're not trying to bring reality into a Theater of the Mind setting if you're running Theater of the Mind. Okay, so let's just talk about in general about theatrics or theatrical approaches to other things in the hobby, especially role playing. One of the things I want to talk about is character voices. I know I've said it before. I'm going to start with character voices. Your character, NPCs, GMs should have their own unique way of speaking. They should have a name. And it should not, when the player characters go, really? What's the barkeep's name? The barkeep's name is Oliver Hintquist. He's got a humpback and only like one tooth on the bottom of his jaw, and he's a surly, curmudgeonly old guy. Give him a personification of the character when you describe it. That leads you into finding the voice for that character and role-playing that character.
A great description will naturally translate into a voice. Mind you, I don't know how you're going to do a voice for no teeth if you actually have teeth, because there is a difference. But again, this is where we go to even a bad voice is better than no voice.
I agree. There's no such thing as a bad accent in role playing. If you start out trying to do a Scottish reel and 2 seconds into it, you sound like the Nasonex bee, then that's fine. Who cares? It's a voice. It's something other than, oh, I'm talking to Jared. Maybe I'm talking to Jared who can't hold on to a fucking accent for 10 seconds. Jesus fucking Christ. Can you pick something? At the very worst, it's entertaining. How do you speak Dutch? How do you do a Dutch accent, Dave?
The worst Keanu Reeves impression in the world.
Goddamn straight.
Dutch. One thing I will say about the voice is don't worry as much about consistency of the accent as worrying about consistency of what accent did you use last time. You know, if this is a character that's going to come up multiple times, you might want to consider at some point evolving them to something you can do on a regular basis with your voice. Don't create a voice that you can't replicate. Like saying something like, my shoes, and then not being able to have an actual conversation in that voice is really bad for maintaining the atmosphere and character of that character. If you can't keep doing the voice, it's probably a bad one for a recurring character.
Yep. And being able to do a voice consistently and not just like the odd catchphrase requires practice. It takes effort and practice.
It's a performance. I mean, absolutely. I've always said this. I want to perfect my Christopher Walken impersonation. Wow. Just so I can put him as an NPC, a major NPC in a role-playing game. Where every time they talk to him, they talk to Christopher Walken. I think that, and I think if I did, my only fear about doing that is that the players will only want to talk to that NPC character over and over again. But it goes too along just making a funny voice. There also are mannerisms and patterns of speech. A character talks very softly. You may do the thing that you see pretentious Hollywood dialogue do all the time is the pause and repeat. When a character says something that the actor can't pull off with enough weight and telegraph the weight of what he's saying, there were bad times. Bad times. Like the pause and repeat the last thing you just said for emphasis. That is part of role play as well. That's part of acting out a character and doing role play as well.
Tim Smith actually makes a great suggestion in the chat, and that is, think of characters you've seen on TV or movies and do a bad impersonation of them. And then in your notes, just write down, the bartender is the dude, or the sheriff is Sam Elliott, or you write down just a quick note of who's in what impersonation you were doing for that character. That way you can come back to it and you have that moment of, this is a character I've done before. The players are expecting a certain response, and I'm not hitting them with a completely different character voice this time around.
You can also, I want to kind of back up for a second and say that we basically, in this hobby, we have two versions of role play. There's first person and third person. Third person role play from your players is acceptable. From the GM every once in a while for an NPC, where third person being the character does this or the character says this, and you describe in third person what the NPC or character is doing is fine. It's all right. It's still role play. But when role play gets when you get more immersed, you get more entertainment, you get more fun out of the hobby with first person role play, where you actually take on that character. I see Dave rolling his eyes. Fuck you, Dave.
You get more out of the role play. Other people may get more out of it from third person.
I'm gonna say everybody at your table is gonna get more from first person role play.
Oh, as a GM, to the players, I think the theatrical first person role play delivers more of a punch.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's because I personally enjoy first person role play. Players who are looking for that third person role play aren't going to be amused by you talking in a funny voice and pantomiming what the character acts like. They're going to get annoyed that you're slowing the game down by inserting that aspect to the game.
All right, I'll give you that. But still, fuck them. So let's talk about, you mentioned pantomime. You want to expand on that a little bit?
Well, imagine for a moment that you're Italian and you talk with your hands. As a GM, it's very important to do things like gestures, pantomime, anything that helps convey that the way people who talk with their hands typically do. If you know, everybody's got that friend who every time they talk, their hands are doing something in front of them between the two of you that helps relay what they're trying to say. That is a skill as a GM you need to develop, because at some point you're going to need to describe something that pantomime really helps set the shape of, the size of it, how tall it is, etc.
And I also think Scott W., the Savage Cheerleader Disembowel, has on more than one occasion described the way he GMs combat scenes by describing pantomime maneuvers, where if you're facing an orc chieftain, when he does the role play, he stands on the chair, so he towers above everybody, and he acts out drawing his hammer or doing whatever.
I believe Scott said he GMs standing up; he doesn't sit down, so he's already towering over everybody, and he's got that military build of having worked out basically every day of his life to a minimum level. Therefore, when he looms, he has a presence. And that's something that if you do at the table, it does definitely convey a completely different thing to your players than if you sit quietly kicked back in your chair just describing something.
I think even like acting out a character's movement, like he walks like this, and at the table as a GM, you stand up Like he goes across the room and it looks like this. And he stands up, he's dragging his back leg with a limp or, hunched over. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about pantomime as part of role play, right?
Take it to the level that's appropriate for your group, but absolutely, if you're gonna do this, do it to the nines. If you're gonna include pantomime, don't stop at simply going, well, it was this wide. Actually stand up and, do the motion of drawing the battle axe or the hunched shoulders and the sunken head, and give them the little voice that sounds sniveling so that they know that they're dealing with a guy who just doesn't quite know what he's doing, and he's really worried about his personal safety, and he's probably got some hygiene issues.
Well, and I'll put it this way: as far as roleplay.
If you really want to improve your chops as a theatrical GM, take a look at the class catalog for your local community college.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I promise you they have one. And
I promise you they are desperate for people to sign up for the classes.
Yeah.
They will love the fact that you want to come in. They don't care what you're going to do with the training.
Right. Not only are they hungry for people, it's fun. It'll be fun to do. You'll have a good time doing it. And you'll learn a lot about how to emote and how to characterize people. And then once you've taken a class, the first class or two, they'll have an improv class. Don't skip it, because that will do more to help you learn to be an on-the-fly improvisational GM than anything else you could possibly do.
I'm going to reword what Jib just said. It will help you be a Savage Worlds GM more than anything else you could do. Savage Worlds is designed for little to no prep. That means the entire experience as a GM is improv. Therefore, if you increase your improv skill, you will just naturally be a better Savage Worlds GM.
Right. And if you're a natural bullshit artist who can come up with stuff on the fly, you're going to do great as a Savage Worlds GM as well.
Or podcast host.
Hey, you're a podcast host.
Mom's a podcast host.
You're a towel.
I resemble that remark.
So I like what Tim has put up here. Somewhat relevant question. What is the golden number of having things prepared for improvising? He assumes it's 20 names, 20 mannerisms, 20 personalities. I disagree. I disagree.
Previous comments.
It's what is germane to the story. Who is that character in that place at that time? Informs everything you really need to know about that character. Now, if you want to add details that kind of fit into the story the way it's going, or just add some bit of backstory, like the bartender is a decrepit old curmudgeon-y guy. That's all you really need to know. But if that's what you come up with on the fly, when the characters ask who the bartender is, once you're done with the role play, reflect on it for a moment. And why is he decrepit? Oh, because he was a captain of the guard in the last Orc War. Oh, he knows a shit ton about this terrain. He knows a shit ton about this and a shit ton about that. I'm just going to go ahead and put that in my pocket, shove it down here, and wait for the players to discover, oh, holy shit, Oliver Krimskaroskas is a fucking expert on, oh shit, he knows the chief, the Orc chieftain personally. They have like a kind of a warrior's respect for each other because they faced off with each other in the war, and that's why he's crippled. It's because the Orc chieftain beat the living fuck out of him. But he has honor and respect for him because he got back up off the battlefield, broken and bruised, and still stood his ground. Whatever. I'm just saying, improvisation doesn't lead well necessarily to having things prepared. It's a more in the moment kind of thing. I understand what Tim is trying to angle at. I get it. There's nothing wrong with having 20 names, 20 mannerisms, and 20 personalities, rehearse it in your pocket and waiting. But I think it kind of kills the creativity in the moment, the spark in the moment.
I think it depends a lot on your style. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jim.
It's good. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think honestly it's a big part of style. If you tend more to the improvisational, having stuff in advance puts you in a box. If you tend more towards relying on having stuff laid out in advance, then being put on the spot to develop something at the table don't have in your notes puts you in the reverse of that. Now you're in a trap where you have to come up with it. You have 30 seconds or so to do so. Because 30 seconds of dead air at your table can completely kill whatever momentum you've built through the night.
It's true.
If you look at your players and go, give me 30 seconds, and it takes you a full 30 seconds, that's a long time that they're not thinking about the game anymore. They've moved on. They're thinking about the barbecue this weekend or the new video game that's coming out, or they're talking to each other about something they just read on their phone that came up through a news app. Their mind has moved away from the game. You've lost them. You typically have about 6 seconds before they're gone. Right. So you have a very narrow window in which to be on it. And if you're dependent on that list of names and you've gone through your 20, then you've just set yourself up for a slight failure.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, the surest way to be quick and at ease when I'm GMing is background knowledge. If I know the world and I know where, the city where we're located, and I know what people are like in the world, and I know what, like, as an example, if I was going to do a Game of Thrones game, I know what a Dothraki is. I know how Dothraki act. I know how Dothraki think. So if I need a Dothraki, warrior, just like off the cuff, I can do that. It's because I know the background. I can make it up as on the fly. If I don't know the background, then I have to know details. And I have to have pre-written details about things. And as David said, that's a box. It's a trap. Because it binds you in. You got this many things. If I use up all of them, I'm done. I've shot my wad for the night. Okay? But if I know the world and I know the people in it, and I know, generically what they're like, then I can come up with a spin on that and pretty quickly. We're in, I'm going to keep using Game of Thrones for the moment. We're in King's Landing, and, you're going into a brothel. Okay, can do. I can pretty quickly spin up a brothel keeper and whatnot, but it's background knowledge that lets me do that.
I agree wholeheartedly, and I'll share just oh my god, I can't believe I pulled this fucking off in Roleplay GM story here real quick, and I think I've maybe talked about it briefly, so I'll keep it brief because we talked about it before. But when we were playing our zombie survival dead end game, I had the players basically rescued by a church commune that was run by a crazed pastor who had his family had died and resurrected. He had them changed in the basement and would ask petitioners that join the community to take the walk of faith through the root cellar. He was convinced that the zombie outbreak was fulfillment of Revelation's prophecy of the dead rising again. And he had a crazy, wacky community. Now, everybody who belongs to this community smiles at him and nods their head because, well, he's got a safe community and he's feeding them. And there's food. However, we don't talk about the people in the basement. We don't.
No one talks about.
No one talks about the people in the basement. So we also had this situation where the party came in off the road. They were getting medical treatment, and we had like an old country doctor as one of the NPCs. Well, actually, more of a veterinarian handing out basic triage. And the nurse that he had was this elderly African American woman who was playing nurse to him. And the characters went, I want to talk to the nurse. What's her name? And I'm like, oh, shit. Mabel? Yeah, her name's Mabel. It just so happens we have a player in a lot later games called Mabel. So that was a complete stretch. And then it was like, okay, well, they start talking to Mabel. I'm like, oh, crap. What does Mabel sound like? And just the voice just hit me like, oh, sweet old lady. So she talks kind of softly, and the tone is kind of rolling like a river. She takes stops at pauses at weird moments every once in a while because she's trying to catch her breath because she talks too much and she doesn't have the same lung capacity. Oh, child. And she uses certain catchphrases when she talks. The players ended up forcing me to live roleplay that character for, I swear to fuck, 20 minutes. And I kept
30, but yeah.
And I kept going, what the oh God. And she became their basic tour guide of the facility. So because I knew what this place was about, why the people who were here, I was able to carry on that interactive role play with the player characters for that length of time without sweating too much about it. Because, like Jib said, I understood the background. I understood the mentality of the people that were there and the person that she was talking to. Now, was her son dead? Was her entire family dead? I don't know. If I planned on her being a more recurring character, I probably would have thought about that. But the point is, like Jib said, know your setting. Know the NPCs. The NPCs are not just talking heads. They are people who are there for a reason. They're the citizens of that community. They should have some sense of belonging, some sense of community.
You know, the things that I want to know about NPCs that I've built into the game are, who are they? Where do they live? And where do they come from? What do they care about? And how committed are they to that? Okay, if they're a bad, excuse me, if they're a bad guy, it helps to know have some kind of idea of what resources they have. I don't need stat blocks for them. I need to know that Black Bart, the desperado, has a gang of 12 guys that he has. Now, if we encounter Black Bart and it looks like Black Bart's going to turn into a more major deal than just like that one encounter, then I'm going to start adding some more flesh on those bones.
Yeah,
and start adding more to it.
12 guys and things like that. But I guess where I'm at is it's illustrated very much by what you just talked about with the Black Bart character. Is I want to know enough about what we're playing within that I can improvise on the fly, but I don't want to have fleshed out the world. I don't write up all my NPCs in advance. I don't write up the world in advance.
Right.
In fact, so we're recently doing the mob thing. And if I were running this, the difference I would have in the way I was running it is when I created a character, on the fly, I would create the crime family he's associated to, and I jot that down in my notes. Now that crime family, when they come up another time and they bump into a member of the crime family, I have that crime family written down in my notes, and I can either have the new guy be part of that family or part of a new family that I create on the fly then too. What I need to know is, hey, this is a mob world. There are crime families. I don't need to know who the crime families are. I don't need to know who the dons are of those crime families, who the capos are, the consiglieres, the what rackets any crime family maintains. I need to know their crime families. I need to know, how does the mob typically work? This is what Jib's talked about in the past of immerse yourself in the genre. So if you're going to run a Game of Thrones thing, absolutely sit down and watch all 6 seasons, 7 seasons, whatever we're at right now of Game of Thrones. If you're going to do Star Wars, sit down and watch all the movies, and I do really mean all the movies,
even the bad ones,
and then watch the Rebels cartoon and the Clone Wars cartoon and consume the media of what it is you're going to play. You know, that way you don't need to know who the Emperor is right now, or if there's even the Sith Empire yet. You know, maybe you end up with a game that's set 1,000 years prior to the rise of the Sith. You still know there's a dark side and a light side to the Force. You still know that somewhere out there are all these planets and they have these types of aliens, and you can kind of pick and choose among that what you want to include in your game without having to worry about, did I write down in my notes that the Conti family controls spice trade on Tatooine, or did I write down in my notes that the Dothraki were or were not at King's Landing at this time? You don't need those details once you strengthen that muscle and are developed enough in knowing the basis of your world. You can decide that on the fly, appropriate to what's going on in the story. If in the story it's not right for the Dothraki to be there yet, they're not there yet. So you don't need Dothraki horsemen and names and customs because they're not there yet. It's not appropriate to your story yet.
Right. You have a protean idea that this kind of thing exists. And I'm going to set it here in this box. And when it becomes important, then I'll take it out and I'll take that lump of clay about the horse riders and sort of start molding it a little bit. I think there is this, and I want to kind of touch on this while the idea is kind of rolling in my head. I think what Dave, Jib, and I all share in common is we are reactive GMs when it comes to the story. It's, well, what's kind of happening in the story? I have some ideas for plot hooks about kind of scenarios that would go down in this game, but paying attention to the play as it's happening and not having all this world history and reams of notebooks and all these details that you're going to end up being married to. They become, it's, what am I trying to say? It's the illusion of control is your greatest enemy as a GM. This idea that you know what's going on, you know what happens next. Fuck all that. Let it all go and play off what the characters put down on the table. Because when that happens, it feels more organic. It becomes, the story is evolving as it's happening at the table, and you're able to react appropriately and react well and kind of uplift that storytelling. It's the idea that, and Jib has said it before, it's not my story, it's the player's story. But as a GM, I'm also a player. I'm also participating in that game. So I'm also picking up what the players are putting down, twisting it into a different origami shape and throwing it back at them on the table. And that back and forth relationship between the GM, the players, develops that story over time.
So going back to, you've got this character, this NPC, we'll call him the bartender. And you do a voice at your players. And then the players say something in reaction. That then becomes part of that character. The player says, oh, well, you speak with a Southern accent. You must be Southern. And they start talking to him about Georgia. Well, now you know your player keyed on that Southern accent. But maybe you don't want the character to be from Georgia. And they say, oh, no, you got me wrong. I'm from Louisiana, y'all. And now you've added something to that character you didn't think of beforehand. It wasn't in your notes or anything. It was just you happened to give the character a Southern accent, and your player keyed off of that. And now you have to come up with more detail. You're going to add a little bit more, or you're going to smear a little bit of that clay a certain way. React to what your players give you lets you mold that on the fly better than you ever could with what you have jotted down in your notes.
And here's why. Okay, here's the why behind why it's better to be a reactive GM than to try to plan everything out ahead. Okay? If you plan everything out ahead, you have to find some way to convince your players to buy into what you're cooking, to buy into the stew that you're cooking. If you are reacting to what they're doing, it's their stew. They won't have to buy into it because they already cooked it.
So Jason Kennedy had actually just said in chat, so how do you get the players to drive the story so you can be reacting to them? And that's simple. Stop writing a story in advance.
Yep.
Okay. You are in the problems department. You throw the grenade in the middle of the table and let them deal with it.
Yeah, your job as a GM. Your job is
grab your bingo card. Because what are you supposed to do if you go into the game with a story?
You're supposed to, I think about something about a typewriter or a laptop and a glass of scotch and go fuck yourself. Something to that effect.
Something along those lines, yes. Your fucking story.
I agree. As GMs, you are the chief operating officer of the problems division of the company. So you go, okay, we're in a mob universe. All right, 1970s mob. All right. There's a gang war. Boom! And you just drop it right on top of the characters. There's a gang war in Harlem. And you guys are caught in the middle of it. And then you just sort of sit back and watch them frantically try to put the pin back in that grenade.
So, and I'm not saying this to beat up on Jason's question. It honestly is, it's a large part of what we talk about on this show. If you want to GM from a module or something that's set in stone in advance, we're not the guys to get advice from. I'm not saying that it's necessarily bad or wrong. I've said that in the past, and I kind of stick by my guns to a certain extent, because those people who want to play like me, that is wrong. But if that's your style of play, I'm not the one you want to ask questions from, because I can't run a module for shit. I cannot run somebody else's story. I can barely run somebody else's world. I really need that freedom to, oh, well, this piece of clay no longer works because the players didn't like it or didn't react to it. So add this instead.
Right. And the great thing is, as a GM, no matter how well you think you know your players, you don't know what they're going to do.
No.
You never know how they're going to react to a situation, what they're going to do. Something you think they would be all over as a plot hook, you drop it, they go, meh.
Meh.
Oh, let's go. Hey, let's go break up this gambling den instead. All right. I guess this night's adventure is going to be out breaking down the gambling. Okay. Give me a streetwise roll to find the gambling den. Oh, no. You talk to Louis the Spike. You're informant on the street. He says, ain't nothing going on. You don't believe him. But he says there ain't nothing going on. What do you do? And it's just that what would happen in the movie of tonight's session or scenario? What would happen? Well, you know what the problem is. You don't know what the solution is going to be or the escalation or what happens, and you have to react to it as it's happening at the table.
And more importantly, the solution is not your concern.
Right.
So, Jared's going to be surprised by it. I'm going to throw Jared under the bus for a minute. Jared just had a session go completely sideways because he figured
I prepared
before he presented the problem to the players.
Yep.
And therefore, he was locked into a set of things that were going to happen that were prepared in advance, that when they ran headlong into the players, the plan did not survive contact with the enemy, and it became an absolute clusterfuck.
Right.
It snowballed and got worse and worse with every time the players were taking action, Jared would try to pull it this way to get it back in line with that story.
Correct.
And every time that correction would overcorrect and snowball the other way. Or it adds momentum every time you try to drag the players back to the story. Every time you try to drag the players back to the expected outcome, instead of reacting to what they're doing, at this point now, you're trying to force what they're doing into the corridor of what you've planned, and it's just going to cause it to ricochet down the hallway and destroy everything you planned and everything the players planned.
And I will say this, it's one of the first sessions in a very long time that I've shown up with any kind of a fucking game plan. And it went horribly wrong. Horribly wrong. I'll put it this way. I ran a zombie survival campaign for like 18 months with very few hitches. You want to know the reason why? I would create some wacko situation, drop it on the table, and let it play out. Oh, well, they pissed this guy off two episodes ago, and he left the party. Well, guess what? He's back for revenge. That was the extent of my planning. He's back for revenge. Here, that's what we're playing. And
for me, it usually goes no further than, well, here's a problem, and to solve this problem, they probably are going to need to deal with this thing in some way. But you know what? I have no idea what the shape of that is.
So Jason has amended his statement. He says, sorry, my experience has been that players seem to want to ride the railroad instead of driving. My question meant how to get players to stop looking for the rails and drive. I don't think you have to. If you do what we're talking about well, neither you nor the players see a steering wheel. You're throwing grenades in the middle of the table, and they're constantly picking up and throwing the grenades out the window. And they're so busy wrapping themselves into handling the plot hooks and handling the problems that you're presenting to them as they try to achieve their goals, that your job is no longer to sit there and plan 3 steps ahead, but to know, well, what are the players' goals? What are they trying to achieve? Well, they're a pirate crew. They want to make money. So now you know, if I throw out money plot hooks, they're going to gobble that shit up. And then every time they do, I can hit them with money problems or problems that affect making the money. And that leads itself to this very type of role play we're talking about, where it's not my job to come into this with an A, B, C, D, E story, and how do I get them from A to B? Well, I need them on this set of rails. These events have to happen. No, it's I have players, and they want to play a pirate game. What's piratey? And present piratey things to them. And let them choose what they're going to do without them ever realizing they made a choice. They don't see the steering wheel. You just say, hey, some guy says X. If those railroad players are going to jump on the first plot hook you throw out every single night, so long as you make it an obvious plot hook, because they see that as the rail. They aren't looking for a steering wheel, and neither are you.
Yeah, I think what Tim said it here best, to quote the Matrix, you must realize that bending the spoon is impossible. There is no spoon, is what you have to realize. Yeah, it's control. Control is the biggest lie that you can tell yourself as a GM. Like, oh, I can prepare this. I can handle this. I can control it. No, you can't.
Control is an illusion.
Yeah, let go.
Okay, so Tim cottons onto this, and he goes, so I agree, good stories have complications and things don't go as planned, but when do you finally allow things to go in their favor? I don't. I don't control whether it goes in their favor or not. They do. When they react to the problem I threw out, the dice and their roleplay determines whether it's in their favor or not. It's not my job to throw another problem and make it worse. It's my job to allow the world to react to their actions, and the next problem is the next plot hook. Yeah, I might throw a complication or two their way because dramatically it's going to amp it up, but the next actual full-on problem, the next grenade I'm throwing in, is the next session, or 2 or 3 sessions from now when I throw that next plot hook. Remember, yes, it's your job to have the world be complicated and dramatic and challenging, but it's not your job to determine when does things work out in their favor or when do things go bad. It's your job to have the world react to what they're doing.
Right, in a sensible way.
Right.
So, yeah, knowing who your NPC is, what their personality is, and we've talked about this. Let's kind of revisit this one real quick, and then I want to get back to our actual topic. Instead of talking about how to run a game from improv, I want to get back to our actual fucking topic for a second.
How to run the game.
Yeah, we've gone afoul of the path by about 20 minutes. But it's fine. It's a good conversation to have. So I think this is what GMs need to understand more than anything else. It's important for you to understand the motivations of your NPCs when you present your NPCs. So we've had this conversation a while back. We have a standard medieval fantasy town and a standard fantasy world. There is a captain of the guard who guards entrance to the castle to get visitation with the king. Your party rolls up, and that's the problem. You need to see the king. Now, what would naturally be there? There would naturally be a guard that you would have to get authorization to gain entrance to the castle. That's just part of the world, the way it exists naturally. Now, I have nothing planned for what happens next as a GM. The player walks up and goes, hey, we need to see the king. And he goes, really? Who are you? Well, I'm so-and-so. Yeah, no, you're not getting in. You're not royalty. You're not getting in. Okay, well, let's regroup, guys. Let's bribe him. He takes offense to being bribed because he's a man of honor. And his position, if he were caught catching a bribe, would have horrible consequences. So he says, once again, no. So you decide you're going to stab him and push right past him and go see the king anyway. Well, I also know this about the guy. He's got a big chip on his shoulder. He's got a huge ego, and he's a vengeful motherfucker if you cross him. I've determined that's who the captain of the guard is. So now there's going to be a reaction.
It may not come immediately. It
right.
might become the grenade that I'm going to throw at you 2 sessions from now.
Right. He may throw himself on the king's mercy and go, listen, they pulled weapons, which they should have checked at the front gates. I don't know how this happened. My apologies, Your Highness. My apologies. And he gets demoted. Then he gets a bunch of his buddies together and visits you in the inn 2 nights later with a bunch of oranges and shit in a sock and beats the living fuck out of you while you sleep.
He throws
he has a blanket party. That is a natural reaction for me as a GM to give. Now, if I've decided he has the vengeful major hindrance ahead of you doing anything or interacting with him, you're dead. Because he's going to slide in the middle of the night and slit your fucking throat. Now, I've done nothing as far as prep with the story other than going, they have to see the king. Well, one way of doing this is going through the guard. Well, they decided to go through the guard. They could have snuck into the castle. They could have approached the king in the hall. They could have come up with an elaborate ruse and fake papers about being noblemen. Any number of things the players could have chose to do. They chose to confront and belittle and attack the city guard. Now here's the world reacting to that decision. And that's the extent of it. That's all you do as a GM. Hello, I'm in the problems department. You have to see the king. Oh, you bump into the guard. He tells you no. Oh, you assault the guard. That was a bad choice. And it's going to have repercussions.
Now, you can take that too far in having a problem arise from everything the players do.
Absolutely.
And that is where you have to be the CEO of the problems department, not the up-and-coming novice of the problems department that's got a chip on their own shoulder and something to prove.
Right.
And
you can't abuse that power.
Right. And everything doesn't have to cock block them.
True.
You know, it could be and again, I come back to my give them the benefit of the doubt point. If they have to get past this guard to get to see the king, and they say, well, I want to like smooth talk the guard and try to convince him that I'm actually a visiting noble from who's he what's it's, and that I really need to see the king, or that maybe that's not plausible, but what they come up with, you have to give it a fair chance to work.
Yeah, so let's say that you have exactly that thing. Your players say they're going to try to convince the guard that they're noble. So whatever player, maybe the face character of the group, who's wearing the nicest clothes, steps forward and starts smooth-talking the guard. And you decide this guard is a veteran guard. He's seen it all. So you're going to put a -2 on any attempt to smooth-talk him or bribe him or fight past him. But you're going to give a +2 to anything where they're calling in things like tradition, honor, the appropriate ceremonial thing that has to happen. And then once you've made those very quick decisions in the moment, listen to what your player puts in their role play, and then have them make the persuasion roll. Good, bad, or otherwise, they still get the dice roll, and you tell them the modifier in advance and let them live and die by whether or not they get a 4.
Yeah. Well, and the thing too is whatever the reaction from the world or the NPC is from that character needs to be measured and reasonable. Because you gave me the stink eye, I'm not going to slit your throat in the middle of the street. I'm a captain guard. No, I operate by a certain code. But I'm just saying that the response is based on the character. It's the same thing with, not all. Guess how many mercenaries fight to the death? None of them.
If I'm a mercenary, I don't fight to the death. The minute things look bad, yeah, my happy ass is down the road.
Right. Oh, no. Hey, listen, I didn't agree to this. You're not paying me enough for this shit. Fuck this. I'm out.
Yeah. I barely fight to the point where I bleed.
Right. So you can decide.
I probably don't even fight to the point where one of my side bleeds.
Right. So in any kind of encounter where you have mercenaries, you've decided this is the situation. Gunmen have been hired to gun them down. The second one of them suffers a wound out of 4, they all DTFO. Because, well, they're mercenaries. Screw it. I've already got hey, I might miss out on the payday, but I got to be alive to spend the money. Right. And this is not what I was sold. So fuck it, I'm out.
If the enemies are all made guys working for the mob who are protecting $1.5 million of money that belong to 3 different crime families, they're not giving up. No matter what the players throw at them, all of the enemies are going to fight to the death because they know walking away from here alive is a death sentence itself. So you have to, again, figure out who it is you're portraying and have them react appropriate to the story and to the character you've decided to present to your player characters.
Right. Okay, so getting back to theatrics. I want to say that you could do something. There's something else, a little tip, trick that you could do when it comes to an NPC to make an NPC memorable. If you're not too confident in your chops with the voice acting, you're not too confident in putting on a presentation. Give them a visual cue, something unique that stands out. He whenever he talks, he flips open and closes the lid on a Zippo lighter. He's got a coin, a large gold coin in his hand that he's constantly flipping over his knuckles. He has a nervous habit. The character always talks with a toothpick in the corner of his mouth. Anything that kind of personifies that character, you can describe as part of that character and hopefully develop some interest in that NPC or character if that's what you're attempting to do as well.
I think the visual cues go hand in hand with what we talked about earlier with the pantomiming. I think another aspect of it is, if you're having a difficult time, make sure you give every one of your NPCs a hindrance. Pick a hindrance from the book or just off the top of your head immediately. Their flaw is the defining feature about them. I don't care what they're good at. I don't care what they're bad at. I care where they're flawed.
Right.
And this is personality flaws predominantly. Those are the things you want to involve in that character right from the jump when you start portraying them. Are they vengeful? Are they quick to anger? Are they slow to anger? Are they gregarious? Pick a hindrance and then role play that.
Agreed. Any other tips or tricks for theatrical immersion? I think we've really covered it.
We talk about a lot of stuff when we did like the Halloween episode on how to run horror. We talked about getting out props to put on the table, doing things like music, set the lighting. If you're gonna get everybody in the mindset, maybe dim the lights in the house or take a sheet and throw it over the lamp so that it changes the color of all the light in the room to deep blue or something. There's a lot of different theatrical things you can do in your environment at your play table. When it comes time for the player characters to get the big clue, here's the weathered map wrapped around a rusty dagger, and you actually drop a prop knife with a rolled up piece of paper around it in the middle of the table. Maybe it falls on top of people's dice and sends things skittering across the table. That's the way you theatrically develop, and the guy reaches out and just drops it in the center of the table. You've just done it with more panache that's going to deliver that scene to your players than any number of words. Again, evocative descriptions are great. A picture is worth 1,000 words. An action is worth 10,000.
Right. I would also say look for any kind of ambient sounds that are common to the setting you're playing. So if the players commonly meet in a bar, if you can just find a recording of an ambient room noise for a bar, people talking, glasses clanking, doors opening and closing, things like that, or a subway ambient soundtrack if they're in the subway, anything like that, just as background, can have a psychological impact on, I actually feel like we're in a bar. Okay, we're in a bar. All right, I can start to picture things now. I can start to get that feeling.
Be careful.
It's not distracting. I'm talking about ambient noise, not
Right.
It shouldn't have a lot of conversation in it.
Keep the volume down.
Yes.
There are a lot of companies that do backing tracks and sound effects and things like that that are really handy for games. Plate Mail Games is a personal favorite of mine. And I have a soundboard app on my iPad that I put sounds for the game that I'm running in. And then when I need something, I'll just tap it. And I have a Bluetooth speaker in the middle of the table and whoop, sound.
Yep.
I think there's an aspect of it, you can have music, you can have things in the background. Jared's absolutely right. Anything with lyrics, probably need to just avoid. See if you can find the acoustic version of that song. Or find it in a language that nobody at the table speaks. You want to play a really popular Metallica song in the background because the players have gone into a bar in New York. Get that song, but get the translation that's in Russian so that none of them can understand the lyrics and their brain isn't pulled away from the game by the lyrics. Instead, they hear that rhythm they recognize. They hear the rhythm of the speech that they recognize. They know it's a song, but it's supposed to be background anyway. So they make sure you play to the strengths of the gaming environment. Don't set yourself up for failure by overdoing any of these things. Like the prop knife that I talked about earlier, don't bring out a sharpened actual dagger to the table and drop it in the middle of the table. Your friends are going to pick that fucker up and swing it around. Someone's gonna lose a piece of their body, and you don't want to have to end the game due to bloodshed.
Right.
Well, also too, anything what we're talking about as far as mood creators at the actual physical table or even at a virtual table, because you can play a soundtrack at a virtual table. It should not detract or distract from what's going on in your game. It's meant to enhance or supplement the experience, not to become the focal point of the experience. It's meant to enhance it. I would also recommend, even too, if go a little far out. If you're playing in a Deadlands Noir game, for example, and it takes place in Louisiana, instead of the typical chips or pizza, ordering pizza, get gumbo. Get some kind of like actual cuisine from that setting in that era, and that's your snack for the night or your meal for your game if you do that sort of thing. Anything you can do to reinforce the flavor of what you're trying to do is theatrical, and it will have an impact. I hate to say the word immersion because of all the stuff we've had with conversations about immersion, but it can help enhance that experience, and kind of it creates player buy-in, because we're asking you to sit down at this table and imagine for 4 hours, 2 hours, you're not you're this person, and it's not this world. You're in the Old West. You're in the Weird West. And anything you can do to reinforce that and help them can help spur that imagination as well. So
Tim asked one more question, and I think we should touch on before we close this out, even though we're at like an hour and a half mark.
Mm-hmm.
Tim said, bring it back to the topic. How do you how do you move from scene to scene and keep it cinematic and theatrical? Like, how do you know when to cut to the chase? And my gut reaction is don't. It is not your job as the GM to put the cattle prod to the players and drive them to the chase. If the players want to spend that entire session planning the heist, then the role play of them talking to each other and the NPCs and everything is far more important than you as the GM taking a cattle prod and pushing them to actually being able to put dice on the table to roll up the actual chase scene to catch the guy or whatever. Don't be too quick to get to the fucking monkey. But at the same time, keep in mind, if you look out and 3 of your players are bored, it's time to get to the fucking monkey. You gauge your player buy-in, gauge what they want to participate in, and make that the focal point of what you're doing. And if you have to do an old school doodly, and this is happening in this other place, do it. Whatever you want to do to move that along, but gauge your players' buy-in to do that. Don't just enforce your timeline. Play at their pace, not your pace.
Anything to add to that, Jib?
Nope, I'm in agreement.
Except being hell-bent for leather, of course.
Yeah, you know.
That was his sound effect for an hour and a half. I gotta go.
Yeah, Jib is experiencing some digestive distress, as everybody just heard. No, he's got some asshole biker neighbors. Okay, so I think that's a good place to kind of wrap this up. Once again, just theatrics, get into it. There's a big payoff at the end of the day to flex that muscle. Do something that scares the living crap out of you. As a GM, do something that scares you. I'll go, okay, you know what? I don't care if it's the worst John Wayne accent impersonation ever. This town sheriff is fucking John Wayne, and I'm going to act like the fucking Duke. And I've only seen one John Wayne movie, and it's probably a horrible impersonation. Fuck it. I'm doing it anyway. And everybody can laugh at me. Everybody can go, dude, you suck. They can break my balls about it for the next, well, forever, because you know how gamers are. Who gives a fuck? It's a memorable moment. Everybody had a good time, and that's the point of getting together to do this thing that we do. So, with that in mind, until next time, this is Jared Savage, Daddy Gunning for Jib and Dave, saying keep rolling and stay savage.